Members of Saftu unions in the civil service say they won't sign the public service salary agreement as it stands. They're not accepting a 7% increase. Saftu's Zwelinzima Vavi joins us in the studio now. Thank you very much, Mr. Vavi. I want to start off by saying, so the wage offer negotiated at the Public Sector Coordinating Bargaining Council on Friday stood at 7%. We know that 4 unions have rejected that offer, and there are still other unions who are waiting for a mandate from their members on whether or not they will reject that or not. Can you speak to us about Saftu's decision and the concerns of your members?
Well, the Saftu affiliated unions who are participating in the bargaining chamber, the PSCBC, have now consulted their members and have held a press conference yesterday, and they have decided to reject the offer and not to sign it, even though that they know, just like before in 2014, their signing or not signing is not making a material difference because they do not constitute a majority at this moment, at this particular point in the PSCBC. The majority of the unions are the COSATU affiliated unions. They constitute somewhere 52–54%, and therefore once they decide to sign, this will go forward irrespective of the views of the Independent Labour Caucus or the views of the Saftu unions. We are rejecting the offer precisely because it is not doing enough to improve the living conditions and the working conditions of the public servants. 7% may look above the official inflation rate, which is about 4.5% or so, but it is actually way below the real inflation, as it will impact on ordinary workers, whose inflation is somewhere between 9 and 11%, driven by 2 main factors. The first one being the price of petrol and or transport. We know that for the poor, they spend most of their income on petrol and or traveling. Secondly, the food inflation has been hovering around 14–15%, and which means that the poor working people spend more of their income on food, and so this offer is not considering that. Secondly, this offer doesn't take forward the historic demands of the public servants. Public servants have been calling for a meaningful improvement of the housing allowance, housing subsidy, sitting now at 1,200 for a subsidy which nobody can get anywhere else in the Republic of South Africa, and sitting at insulting 900 as a housing allowance. There's been a historic agreement, at least, that now government can take forward, can consider both application of husband and a wife, but the government alone will now decide whether you get it or you not get it. The second historic agreement or cry by the public servants is the issue of the danger allowance. Government employees are calling for the insurance so that if you end up shooting somebody accidentally, if you are a nurse, you contract a disease through the needle or whatever, you must have some form of insurance to cover you. The government is insisting on giving them some form of an allowances, which doesn't take us any further. Even that inflation calculated is discriminating against certain segments of South African workers. It's 7% for level 1 workers, but it is then staggered below to the point that by the 3rd year, in fact by the 2nd year, the guys who are on level 10, 11, 12 will not be getting any kind of increase. They will just get a CPI, meaning that they will see no improvement whatsoever of their wages and working conditions. In our view, the government is in crisis. This government is in crisis. This government have allowed internal squabbles inside the ANC to work themselves out to the point that it ended up being downgraded by two major rating agencies. This government is in crisis in that it is running short of resources to meet its basic obligations. And as a result of that, this government is embarking on an austerity program to cut expenditure, including cutting the expenditure in relation to how it will remunerate its own employees, which means that the government is trying to resolve the crisis that workers did not create at the back of the workers, and we reject that.
Ultimately, though, if the majority does decide to go agree with the wage offer, it gets signed, it gets implemented, what recourse do Saftu affiliated unions have? What's the way forward then?
We're considering every option, but you must look at the realities of what we started with. It is a reality that the Saftu unions or any other unions outside the COSATU unions do not have the majority in the public service. As we speak, what we can only hope is that workers will now see that their leadership in those COSATU unions are wanting to sign and create peaceful conditions for Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC campaign come 2019. They don't want any kind of an upheaval at this moment so that they can deliver workers on the silver platter for their continued slaughter by the capitalist crisis currently underway in our country. And that's why we're saying that we ought to go back to the drawing board. We must recruit these workers. We must now show workers the price that they pay for the fact that their leaders and the unions are forming part of a tripartite alliance and therefore are in the same bedroom with the government, and they don't want to rock the boat because they think that the ANC and Cyril Ramaphosa in particular will have a serious campaign or a very difficult campaign come 2019. Now here's the issue that I think that we should speak about. The VAT increase of 7%, which moved the VAT from 14 to 15%, the increase of fuel levy, the increase or the introduction of a sugar tax, as well as the increase of the so-called sin taxes, which amounts to anything between 7 to 10%, all of them combine to mean that the 7% represent a serious assault on the living standards of the poor. And that's why we found this signing of the agreement in 2014 and now signing yet of another sweeter deal between the COSATU unions and the government as a double assault. It means 6 years of austerity, 6 years of a declining living conditions of the public servants, and 6 years of poverty, 6 years of homelessness. But for more importantly, many workers had better housing allowances during the apartheid era. They had a better choices in terms of the medical aid. Now GEMS is imposed on them. There is no option of whether you want to form part of this government employee medical aid scheme or you don't. You have to be in it. And yet we all know that that scheme runs out of funds in 6-7 months of each and every year, and it leaves the public servants dry for the remainder of the year. The workers must learn. There is just no way that the government, which is in the same bed with the majority of the trade union, can ever act in the best interest of those workers because it fears nothing. It fears nothing because they are all in a sweetheart arrangement that does not advance the interest of workers.
Lastly, give us your views on President Cyril Ramaphosa's 100th days. We know policy directly impacts workers. What are your views on the policy changes so far?
We have absolutely nothing to celebrate. It starts with this issue of the slap on the face of the public servants. It goes to the imposition of the VAT and all manner of other taxes that are intended to milk the working people and the poor dry, whilst taking no steps to ensure that the tax system in our country is progressive, and that is redistribution of wealth from the rich to the poor. It goes to the fact that on Tuesday in the National Assembly, this government is passing 3 bills. 2 of those bills are intended to emasculate the workers and to take their right to strike away. And the third bill is intended to entrench poverty at 20 rand an hour, and therefore to maintain the status quo in relation to the inequalities that continue to grow in our economy. It goes further to say this government will not really take steps against real corruption that is taking place in the private sector, which dwarfs, as we say, the corruption that we become popular thanks to the media focus on it, led by the Zuma-Gupta era. The illicit cash outflows in this economy, the price transfers out of this economy, all of them make South Africa to lose billions and billions of rands, and we can be absolutely sure the former director of Loanmin, who is a direct beneficiaries of those money laundering schemes out of this country, will never take decisive action against illicit cash outflows of the economy. So for us, the poor is getting poorer, the rich is getting richer, the resolutions of the capitalist crisis, the resolution of the crisis created by the inner problems of the ANC are being resolved at the back and at the expense of workers, and that's why we're saying no to corruption, but certainly no to Cyril Ramaphosa's presidency too.
Thank you very much, as always, for your views. That was Zwelinzima Vavi of Saftu.